Hi, this is Dennis Seatsma, Homestead, Florida, near south of Miami. This video is about emissions and drivability issues on a 94 Astro van that has the older diagnostic system on it, how to read the codes and what we have. It's best to try to ferret out one issue at a time when working these codes. On this van, I've got code 12, which is normal. That's a health check on the diagnostic system. So you should always have a number 12 code. I also have a number 32 code, which says EGR valve. Now the history is I've tried to replace this. I cleaned the EGR valve several times in the lifetime, but this van's got like over 207,000 miles on it, so it's time to replace the EGR valve. I also have an 83 code, which is the airbag, the SIR system. That's telling me I have a problem with the arming sensor, and that's not to be confused. Some scanners will read code 83 as some other issue, so you want to obey the service manual. And there's online resources, Mitchell 1 Do-It-Yourself and alldata.com Do-It-Yourself, and those offer interactive tools for troubleshooting. But what I have here is I have a high idle and a surging idle sometimes, and I've already done a lot of work on the van in the past on the fuel injection system. This is a central multi-port fuel injection, CMFI, and I've replaced the fuel pump and all of that up to make sure I'm at, don't have a problem with that. I've replaced the TPR sensor, the throttle position sensor. I've replaced the IAC valve, but this code is telling me I need to replace the EGR valve. So you got to be careful on these vans between VIN W and VIN Z. This is an EGR valve for a VIN W, which is for central multiport. The other EGR valve is different. It has a connector going in a different direction, like straight out, and that's for VIN Z, which is the throttle body injection. So I'll start the engine and let you see what it's doing. I also have a sluggish shift from 1 to 2 on the transmission, and sluggish passing gear or no passing gear downshift. And that's, best to just worry about one thing at a time and work one issue at a time when you have multiple problems in a vehicle. And I had in the past a history of it, a stuck TCC valve that's used for in the automatic transmission, but that code's gone right now. The codes could come and go depending on the situation in a vehicle, and always check the codes to make sure it's the right code, because some of the scanners will give you the wrong code. If you don't have a scanner, they're pretty cheap online for the OBD1. For the OBD2, I can't talk about because I don't know much about OBD2. The most auto supply stores will read the codes for free, but if you don't have a scanner, you can just read it right off the diagnostic connector by shorting pin 1 and 2, and you can do that using this cute little tool that I have, and it shorts out 1 and 2, or if you have a code on the automatic brake system, it's A and H on the lower hand of the tool, A and H, or A and B, yeah. And if you don't have this tool, you can just use a jumper. But I've already read the codes, and you can read the codes by going to the DLC connector, putting a short across A and B. If you don't have this little tool, you can use a jumper. And then all you do is turn on the ignition switch and you read the codes. And I've read the code is 2-digit number, and they flash 3 times before going to the next code. And you can also check with the engine running for open loop or closed loop. That will tell you if the engine's running at isostolic or not. And the different rates are, according to the service manual I looked up this morning, a closed loop is 1 per second and an open loop is 2.5 times per second. And that will change as you're driving the vehicle, whether you're in open loop or closed loop, with closed loop being the optimum for isostolic for the best fuel consumption. Closed loop is what you want. It could go open loop if you put the foot in the gas, or so as you're driving the van around, you can watch it change open and closed loop if you've got it pins 1 and 2 shorted on the OBD1. But what I've got wrong with this van, not really wrong, besides the squeal from one of the pulleys here. I put a 200 amp alternator on it. It's been making that noise since. So anyway, I'll figure that out later. But I'm going to change the EGR valve today. And I've had it off before and cleaned it. But you'll hear that it's surging and the idle is a little bit high. And this situation comes and goes. So I assume the EGR is not working exactly as it should. And I don't know, I got 207,000 miles, almost 208,000 miles. I bought this vehicle new in 1994. So anyway, that's just a little bit about how to read the codes using this cute little tool. And I don't even remember where I bought that, but you should get the service manuals. You can buy them online used. A lot of good information in the service manuals, and the online tools like Mitchell One Do-It-Yourself or alldata.com Do-It-Yourself offer online tools, interactive, that help you with troubleshooting. So I think those services are $30 a year, something like that. Yeah. So anyway, next thing I'm going to do is take this apart and change the EGR valve. And most people know how to do that, so I may show a little bit of it, but changing the EGR valve is pretty straightforward. Just make sure you have the right bolts on the valve. I had trouble getting my bolts out, and I bought new bolts from GM, and they looked them up, and the guy gave me the wrong bolts. So you got to be careful whether it's metric or SAE to get the right bolts if you replace those EGR valve bolts. And usually what goes wrong with the EGR is they get carbon stuck in the spindle, and if you rev the engine, sometimes you can clear that. No, don't rev it too high, just enough to try to clear that carbon out of the spindle. And a lot of times mechanics will clean the EGR valves are pretty durable, but they're like little stepper motors, and they are precision. And so when in doubt, it's probably a good idea to replace your EGR valve. And like I said, I'll replace the IAC, I replace the throttle position sensor, and the next thing I'll do if this doesn't do it is I'll clean or replace the map sensor. But reading the service manual to understand how the emissions and engine management system works, because the engine works with the transmission and vice versa. So if you got a bad map sensor, you can actually do harm to your transmission. This one's got a 4L60E transmission in it. They also use a 4L80E, and there's a difference in the code, so be very careful knowing, if somebody says you got a problem with the transmission, make sure you know the codes for a 4L60 versus 4L80, and you can read them right off the dash. Because I had transmission shop tell me I had a problem, and turned out it was the airbag. I had a hell of a time convincing the manager that the problem was with the airbag system, and the way I resolved that 83 code was I had to replace this. I went to a salvage yard and got a sensor and replaced it. And that cleared the code for, like, I don't know, years. but now the code's back again, so probably need another sender. They're pretty expensive if you buy OEM for the airbag sensor, so of course if you get one from a salvage yard, you know what condition it's in. I also have a problem with the ABS on this. I got a 4WAL ABS and I've tried to repair it and I can't get parts. And the problem is with the control unit, the 4WAL, with big thing underneath the master cylinder. And I've even had people who worked at the factory where those Kelsey Hayes 4WAL ABS were made. He said they're almost impossible to repair. And Race Bestis used to repair them, but then they discontinued. So most people that have these older vans, they can't get the ABS unit for it. So if you're a restorer, keep that in mind. Before you spend money on body work or paint and you want the ABS to work, make sure you can get the ABS working first before you do anything else. And I had this van gone through the body shop in 2017. It needs to go through again. I got some places coming back again or still leaking above the windshield. I had a rust hole on both sides of the windshield, above the windshield, and they cut that out and patched it, but it's still leaking, so I'm not sure why it's leaking either. I don't think they used the right filler. I think they should have used an epoxy like USC all metal. So anyway, I'm going to do this next, just change the EGR and see if that code goes away. Hopefully it will. Okay, so far I've loosened the two front clamps and took out the air filter out of the air box. I've released the 5/16 clamp on the upper air intake plenum, and have removed three 13mm bolts. 13mm bolts and one plastic retainer. Then I can pull this plastic box out of the way, I think. Okay, and I've dropped one of the bolts I gotta recover down into the front grill, but by using a little bit of force you get this plastic to snap out of the way. And then the next one here below it, just a little bit of wiggle and it'll come loose. And then the next thing will be getting to the next clamp there to move some of these things out of the way and make room so I can see the EGR valve. But I'm gotta find that bolt. These bolts are not easy to come by. Okay, I replaced pulled the 2-pin weather pack connector that goes to the temperature sensor. Released that. It's got a little clip on it. Pulled that loose, and then I loosened the back clamp, which will let me pull this snorkel off out of the way, and should give me good access to the EGR valve. Maybe I may have to take this upper shroud off and the upper radiator hose, but I may be able to get to it without doing that. So I'm going to release that weather pack connector on the EGR valve next, and then see if I can get to the bolts to pull that EGR off without having to take more of it apart. Okay, the 4-pin weather pack connector came off. You want to be careful because the wiring can be fragile on those after all these years. It's been 24 years, but I got the connector loose just by gently prying on the weather pack connector with a straight screwdriver, wet screwdriver, and then gently prying on either side. And then using this, it's a 13mm socket with a 3-inch extension with a universal, and then two 6-inch extensions. I was able to reach in there and get the 2 bolts loose and get the old EGR out. Hopefully I'll get the new one to go in smoothly. That'll be the next step. So I'm going to stop the camera and we'll try to do that. Okay, after a couple hours of cussing and fussing, I found I had to remove the radiator hose to make enough room for my right hand, because I'm right-handed, to get to the right-hand bolt on the EGR valve. And I didn't want to strip it, so I used something a little more delicate to get the bolts started. And you can use 13mm or the closest American size, which is 1/2. But anyway, got the right hand bolt started, and then I used a Phillips head to align the left hand bolt, and then slip it in. And I used plenty of, I like to use never sees. Before you start anything, you need to disconnect the battery. Not that you're going to short anything out, but just in case. Anyway, I got the new EGR valve in and plug connected, so I'm going to put the rest of it back together and start it up and see what happens. Hopefully it'll go. And I've not found this lost bolt here yet but I don't need that for testing it to see if I did any good to improve it. And I think I found what was making this squeaking noise. This metal thing was scraping against the belt. So, and this took a funky, this had a double hose clamp, and it was a funky size. I had to use this socket, which was long, deep well, 1/4 inch with a small drive. I think that's 1/4 inch drive, 1/4 inch socket. So I'll put some of this back together and then we'll start it and see what happens. Hopefully the squeak's gone too. Okay, it's a few minutes later. I've reconnected the battery terminal. I put the snorkel on with the temperature sensor, made the connection, got the water hose on and tight. I didn't top off the coolant yet because I wanted to see what happens when I crank it up. Okay, see if the idle is going to surge anymore. Okay, and the squeak's gone. Idle's a little fast, but get this radiator cap off so I can top off the coolant. Down here it's surging and hunting anymore, as we were doing before. Still got to find that missing bolt, and I'll top off the coolant next while it warms up. There was a difference in the gaskets. This one came with a gasket like this, which is like a fiber gasket, and the other one was a metal gasket. But I don't hear it hunting and surging anymore. But it didn't do it all the time, so I have to drive it around a little bit to find out. Okay, after it warmed up, the surging came back. The squeak came back. So I'll have to troubleshoot these idles one at a time. I've replaced one of these with new, and it's a fairly new alternator. So far all I've accomplished is making a video, putting in a new EGR valve, so I got a spare, and lost a bolt that I got to find yet in the van. I'll do that after I get a shower and think about this a little bit. We'll check the codes after I drive it around a bit, see if we got rid of that EGR code. Okay, well I finally recovered the missing bolt, and the reason these bolts are hard, they got an extension on here that self-start into the fan shroud. So for that reason I like to make sure I don't lose these bolts because it's got that extension on there. Anyway, it was stuck down in the bottom of the bumper, and I found it with a flashlight and was able to fish it out with a magnet. It happens pretty often that I lose tools into the bumpers on this Astro. I even found a ratchet in there one time. So now that I've recovered the bolts, also the EGR code is gone. The code was I think number 33. Let me check my notes. My notes say 32. The EGR code was 32, and that's fixed now. So I think I made an improvement here. Please like, share, and subscribe. This Dennis Seats, my homestead, Florida. Replace the EGR valve because I'd cleaned it before and that didn't help. And at 208,000 miles, I guess I needed one. So let's see how it drives after I drive it around a little bit and see if that code comes back or not. But I think it's fixed.